So, slightly different sort of video today. It's a low intensity week. I was pretty knackered last week, so I'm just doing zone 2 riding. For me, zone 2 means different things to different people. Obviously, I'm just going to do kind of 200 to 230 watts. I'm going to aim for, averaging. Don't know if I'll hold it. Where I live on the Wirral Peninsula has a bit of a reputation as being boring, but for me, for what I want, it's perfect. If you look at this view, it's about 10 miles from my house. And what's perfect about where I live for me is that I can be in Liverpool city centre in 15-20 minutes, great city, and I can be out here riding this in half an hour, and even the roads down to here are good. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to try and show you a set of cycle paths we've got. I'm not even going into Wales. Well, I'm kind of going into Wales. Just down here, that cycle path kind of straddles the border. But I'm not crossing the River Dee, which is behind me, which is like proper Wales. I'm going down into Chester and I'm riding, we've got almost 40 miles of uninterrupted cycle paths. And I don't tend to ride them because you need to go a bit slower, you need to be aware of all the other people, they're completely flat, etc. But I thought on a Zone 2 day it'd be really nice to show you guys. This might be a really boring video, but see if you like my local cycle paths. For anyone who likes maps, this gives you an idea of the extent of the cycle path network that I'm about to follow. I start on the Marsh path, Burton Marsh. Interestingly to me, this used to be a military firing range access road, and the firing range is still there. They've opened up the access road to cyclists and walkers, and obviously the scope of the firing range is much reduced, so you're never really in any danger. The Strava segment's actually called Dodge the Bullets, but even when they're shooting, it's very much like away and safe. So, like I say, I hope this is of interest to some. I've set the bar so low for content on my YouTube channel that I don't really need to apologise for this being boring, because it's also dull. But I was lucky to be there on this beautiful day. It was cold, but this sunshine made it truly lovely to cycle this set of paths. This marsh path, it is relatively new to me, because when I started cycling around here, this didn't exist, and you had to go down the main road a lot further to get into Wales, which was not great. And now this is basically our default way into Wales, so this little bit of path I cycle nearly every weekend. It really cuts off a big section of A road, which is absolutely perfect. Gives you a lovely view and a nice way to start any ride. The only drawback, as I've mentioned before, is that quite often there's sheep along it and there is feces everywhere, which can be problematic. I've put a lot of these sections in where you go around gates and stuff, because I didn't want to just edit the nice bits in, if that makes sense. I wanted to show you that, you know, as a functional cycle path network, there's loads of little annoyances that I wish weren't there. I'd love it to be my own personal racetrack that's just completely open, but it's not. The reality of the infrastructure is there's lots of bits and pieces like this where you have to go through gates and you have to slow down, and there's walkers with earphones in who don't listen and take up the whole path, etc, etc. The marsh path ends and it takes you out to this Deeside industrial estate, which makes perfect sense in building bike infrastructure to where people need to work. It's not the most glamorous bit of this cycle path network, but in terms of practical infrastructure, it's brilliant. And all the way round that industrial estate is segregated cycle paths. I don't always use all of them, because heavy goods vehicles come in and out of those driveways, and frankly, that scares me more than riding in the road. I should say, I'm not at all scared of riding in roads. I'm very happy riding A roads, and I don't like that some cyclists get judgmental about other cyclists using busy roads. I think the only way for us to normalise being treated as equals on the roads is to use them and to not be scared of them. But when you've got a network that's this good around you, I really think it's something to enjoy as well. They're just two different kinds of cycling. I love these sections, these really wide, smooth tarmac sections around this industrial estate. They're a bit weavy, but they're absolutely perfect for just rolling along, having them to yourself so you can see this lovely meadow on my left that's got an orchard in it, and it says help yourself to apples in autumn, which is great. And now we're riding along the railway line that actually goes from the town I grew up in down into Wales, but there's like one train every 3 hours. I just said this is a nice Dutch hill because it's just a slight incline up to a bridge.
Straight over to Wales, left to the cycle path network.
I don't know if I'm going to keep the stuff that I've said on camera in the audio much, but I was just saying that you go straight over that bridge along the cycle path along the railway into Wales, into Shotton, which is brilliant, and there's more cycle paths on the other side. But the main network carries on along the River Dee here, and it's very long, actually, sort of, I don't know, at least 10 miles down to Chester, just like this. And this is quite reminiscent, I think, of... My dad used to live in Wiesbaden in Germany, and he used to talk about cycling along the Rhine, and there's miles, hundreds of miles of flat cycle path along the side of the Rhine, which is brilliant, but mind-numbing. I don't know how anyone could be excited about an entire ride like this. I already think this is too long to be that interesting. It's a bit of a privilege, I guess, to be fed up of such a great cycle path, but it can get quite boring. As you can see, these are well used. You know, this is a random Thursday afternoon during work time, and you'll see the amount of cyclists I see along it. You can imagine what it's like on a Saturday morning.
Open road. So there's shoot-offs to the left, over the river to the right. They tend not to be so complete as this, but this like spine of this cycle path network down the river, just unimpeded.
It helped that I had a tailwind down here, so I always try and figure out, when I do this as a whole loop, have the tailwind along the river and the headwind through the town, because you've got no protection here. It's very isolated, so this can be quite a slog when you're into a headwind, and I've had some miserable rides down here. The nature of the sort of river valley is that it funnels the wind, and it's either a headwind or a tailwind along here, even if it would be cross elsewhere because of the funneling nature of the valley. But it's truly beautiful, and I'm just pulling in. You have to do a little zigzag here, and there's a footbridge that goes across the river, and that takes you towards climbs like the steps and stuff that I've shown before. So this is another way that we go quite regularly. And like I was saying at the beginning, if you want to, I don't know, go out and you're adamant that you're going to average 20 miles an hour or something, this is a bit of a stupid place to do it because there's so many gates and things like that get in your way. Definitely stick to roads, I think, but if you just want a nice day out spinning on your bike, you couldn't really ask for more than this. I'm just coming in now to the city of Chester, which, in my opinion, is one of the most criminally underrated cities in the UK. It is so historic. It was the Roman stronghold in this part of the UK, so it's got almost complete Roman walls. And similar to cities like York, there's loads of history as well as sort of new stuff, great pubs, good food scene, or blossoming food scene. I don't think York offers anything that Chester doesn't, but tourists rave about York and you don't really hear them talk about Chester, which I always think is a bit strange. It's slightly further from my house than Liverpool, but it's not that far, so it's the perfect like going for a day out or going out to do some activities sort of place. And if you want good food and drink, me and my mates used to come to Chester relatively often. So yeah, I do really like it. I didn't include too much of the city centre footage for various reasons, and I didn't get into the good historic area because of this cycle path. But you ride along the river right into the heart of the city, which is quite a nice opportunity. Loads of good bridges. This isn't one of the best one, but you come under this archway and you open up on the racecourse. So on race days, this path is closed so that you can't just, for free, go and watch the races, which makes sense. But on every other day, it's open. Chester races are brilliant if you want to go and lose a load of money on cocaine and gambling, which thousands of people do every race weekend. And there's a lovely view out to the city that's not come out at all, obviously. It never does. But yes, very pretty and a great little piece of infrastructure. Again, avoids a lot of main roads, which is really useful. Look at this cracking bridge that you get to cycle under. There's a few brilliant bridges over the Dee around here. They are very impressive. And then, I mean, the network gets a little bit worse here because this is properly like the heart of Chester at this point. There's a lot of people. This is part of the university on the left. It gets very busy. I clearly got bored of the cycle path and went on the road for a little bit because it's less chaotic. And on my left here are the Roman walls of Chester. That is, I don't know, 1,000 years plus old. I don't know how old. I should probably. But yeah, historic Roman city with lots and lots of Roman ruins and architecture everywhere. And to my right is this beautiful part of the River Dee. Oh, it's to my left when I'm on the rear view camera, where there's like tiered steps down to the Dee, and you can, you know, hire a rowing boat or a pedalo or whatever and just have a nice day out. It's a really fun place to come as a family. Very nice, but I got fed up of all the people, so I didn't film the best bit. I shouldn't have come in the afternoon. If I'd done this at like 7 AM on a summer's morning, I'd have it all to myself and you'd see just how beautiful it is. But alas, I didn't quite paint it in its best light. And you can continue cycling along the river, but instead I came up to this back alley because it's much, much quieter. The only thing that lets down this cycle path network is from this part of Chester, there's then about 4 miles of having to ride a little bit through the city. Now, it's all signposted as cycleways. It's blue cycle lanes, and you in theory have a little bit of segregation, and they're not busy roads, so it's not a problem. But I do think it's a shame that in an otherwise immaculate network of cycle paths, you have to do a little bit of road riding like this. Such is life in the UK, I guess. You can't have it all, but I'm really impressed with what we do have. I've just pulled in here to the best cafe on this network, called Meadow Lee. It's a farm shop cafe, and lots of the stuff is very local. Really nice place, run by really nice people, so it's great. So my dad and I have filmed from here before. This little bench at the very bottom of, I think it's called the Chester Millennium cycle path. We just call it the Greenway, as per these signs. So I've done one half. I've done all of the Dee cycle path, and as that sign says, 10.25 miles to Connor's Quay, which is the far end of this path. This goes through the middle of Chester. This one will probably be slower. It goes through a lot of suburbs and stuff. It's pretty uninterrupted, but there'll be lots of bits where there's like kids and dogs and walkers and, you know, all those justifiable things on a mixed-use cycle path. So I might not get a great time down it, but it's very nice. Hopefully you'll enjoy the second half. I didn't intend for this to be a video about the merits of Zone 2 training or otherwise. I never really plan to do low intensity weeks. They just come up every so often. Either I have less time to cycle, so it happens naturally, or I'm so tired I go, oh, I need a week off. That's what happened this time. And Zone 2, I see so many people argue about whether it's like just a gentle spin or whether it's pretty intense but not enough for stuff to build up. And I think there's arguments on all sides for all of it. The only thing I hate is seeing people post, Zone 2 should be this, because, like, says who? Top coaches can't agree on it, so some idiot on the internet in YouTube comments definitely doesn't know for sure what Zone 2 should be. It's just, I think, whatever your body needs and responds to well without building up too much fatigue, right? So for me, I don't bother sticking to Zone 2 heart rates because I think training to heart rate is, well, fractionally better than nonsense, but not much. I just basically cycle as fast as I can without feeling any lactate build up in my legs, and that's nice. It's still meant to be a workout, just not a really, really hard one, right? That's how I treat it, and it means it's fun. I find Zone 2 riding relatively boring. I would have loved to push on much faster than I did. So along the Greenway, there's lots of little bits like this where the path goes behind houses and through parks and that kind of thing. And I think that's absolutely perfect. This serves the city of Chester from suburbs to the city centre, and from 2 bits of suburbs you might want to get between on your bike, which, what more could you ask for in terms of infrastructure? I think that's brilliant. I'm not saying it serves the entire city perfectly, but for the parts along it, it really is like of merit to access different things, and cycling infrastructure needs to be practical. There's no point building like beautiful expensive cycle paths and taking away from road networks if you're linking 2 places that no cyclists need to go between. That's when you get the Daily Mail mob going, oh, there's a new cycle path and no one's using it. Well, that's not cyclists' fault. I'm not going to suddenly start riding places that are of no use to me just because someone's built a cycle path there. That's really on the planners. And I think having this network goes to show if you build things in the right places, they really will be used incredibly well. The other part of the network that I didn't go through as much, where I said if you go over the railway bridge, you end up in Wales, that goes to the industrial estate that employs a huge number of people who live in those North Welsh towns. So if you cycle through at what I would call shift change time, like around 7 a.m, or they do like 12-hour shifts in these factories a lot, you will see hundreds of people on bikes travelling from their home to this industrial estate. They've got to get across the river, but it's hard by car because of the nature of the road network, so it's better to cycle, and I think that shows just how well used these things can be. So there's my little pitch for sensible cycling infrastructure. Don't just randomly paint lines on roads and say this is a cycle path. If it's not fit for purpose, it's not going to be used. If it's not going useful places, it's not going to be used, and cyclists should be unapologetic about that. It is on the planners to put in like sensible infrastructure, and this is a brilliant example of that. I believe that every city should have a facility like this. And without getting preachy, I expect a lot of cities in the UK do, and I just don't have much experience of them. I'd love in the comments if you guys have similar things around you to let me know, and obviously Dutch viewers, you're going to say everywhere is like this, and that's brilliant. I'd love to hear about what you guys have as an equivalent. And do let me know, actually, what your take on this is, because I don't know. It helps me for context. If you say, this is way better than anything I've got near me, wherever you may be, or say, this is rubbish, this really should be the bare minimum, and you're touting it as some amazing thing, I'd love to hear that too, because it's really good perspective. So this is an old railway line, as you may be able to tell, and to be frank, it's not the most picturesque cycle path. It's dead practical, as evidenced by all the people using it. I put this bit in just so you see the absolute ruffians. Look at these youths politely getting out of my way and calling each other to get out of my way. they were lovely, those lads. So yeah, I remember once my mum saying, it's a bit boring down here, isn't it? And I thought, what a privilege to be bored of this. It is boring. I would never choose to ride it normally because it's a bit tedious, but it is lovely. So here's a bridge. This is over the main road that goes into Wales, so that you don't even have to deal with busy road junctions. Unfortunately, not 2 days ago, coming down this bridge, some local knobheads vandalised the fence and pulled one of these wires across to the other side and made like a snare, and a cyclist went over his handlebars and broke his collarbone, got concussed. I think those sort of things can happen anywhere, but it did make me quite nervous down here. I've never heard of anything like that happening in the 10 years that I've been cycling along here, but unfortunately, some people are just dicks. So we're getting back in now to the industrial estate that I started in, and off to the side, there's loads of little, like, shoot-off paths. And all the way around this network, actually, there's shoot-off paths for you to access different things. They're not complete loops, but they're very good. And here we are, back to where I started. So that's my loop done. Beautiful low sun here now. Behind me is Denall Lane, and you know my deal with Denall Lane. I've got to do it sub 2 minutes, which on a zone 2 day is impossible. So instead, I'm going to take you along here, which is circumventing Denall Lane, which goes... Random car, I didn't mean to. Anyway, this last bit of cycle path is horrible. I hate it. You're probably going to hate it. It's full of speed bumps, it's very narrow, it's chaos if you want to do more than 5 miles an hour, but it avoids Denall Lane, so that's what I'll do. I hope you've enjoyed my local cycle path loop. It was about a 90-minute loop moving time, so not bad, not miles, really good for a zone 2 ride. Beautiful evening as well, I'm very lucky. to be greeted with this view. Now, for a proper surprise / coincidence.
Nice that voice, Nick, innit?
Yeah?
Stu, you alright?
How you doing, mate?
I thought it was you, nearly knocked it over. How you doing?
Yeah.
You
Very
alright?
good, thank you.
See you, mate.
Good to see you. Sorry, I got cereal on my hands.
Right, how you doing?
Yeah,
Recognised
brilliant.
that voice on the video. That was
Yeah.
awesome.
That was fun, wasn't it? Proper highlight of my ride, bumping into Stu, who I'd never met before. So yeah, very nice. Along this bit of path, actually, there's a cafe called Nets, which is really nice in terms of location, but the coffee is dreadful, like instant coffee, so I try and avoid it. But the cakes and sandwiches are nice, tea's nice, and the spot's nice. But as you can see, this is a path that's best kept for walking or really, really slow social riding. I'd rather ride roads at this point. All you need is to meet one person, and it feels dangerous. These ladies were really polite and nice, but yeah, not ideal. But otherwise, it's part of a great piece of cycling infrastructure, so it is good. I should appreciate it, but it's just not for me. It's better suited to families and stuff. You come out of the Harp Inn and up into Neston.